God, grant me serenity to accept the things I cannot change, courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. Welcome, everyone. My name is Rhonda Reed. I'm an alcoholic. My sobriety date is May 15th, 2008. And I'd like to welcome everyone. If you have any noise makers or buzzers, we ask you to either turn them off or silent them as to not to disturb the meeting. AA preamble. Alcoholics Anonymous is a fellowship of men and women who share their experience, strength, and hope with each other that they may solve their common problem and help others to recover from alcoholism. The only requirement for membership is a desire to stop drinking. There are no dues or fees for AA membership. We are self-supporting through our own contributions. AA is not allied with any sect, denomination, politics, organization, or institution. Does not wish to engage in any controversy. Neither endorses nor opposes any causes. Our primary purpose is to stay sober and help other alcoholics to achieve sobriety. AA open meeting statement. This is an open meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous. We are glad you are all here, especially the newcomers. In keeping with our singleness of purpose and our third tradition, which states that the only requirement for AA membership is a desire to stop drinking, we ask that all who participate confine their discussion to their problems. And I've asked 2 home group members to read How It Works and 12 Traditions.
Hi, my name is Jane, and my sobriety date is September 29th, 2019, and yes, I am an alcoholic.
Amen.
How it works. Rarely have we seen a person fail who has thoroughly followed our path. Those who do not recover are people who cannot or will not completely give themselves to this simple program. Usually men and women who are constitutionally incapable of being honest with themselves. There are such unfortunates. They are not at fault. They seem to have been born that way. They are naturally incapable of grasping and developing a manner of living which demands rigorous honesty. Their chances are less than average. There are those, too, who suffer from grave emotional and mental disorders, but many of them do recover if they have the capacity to be honest. Our stories disclose in a general way what we used to be like, what happened, and what we are like now. If you have decided you want what we have and are willing to go to any length to get it, then you are ready to take certain steps. At some of these, we balked. We thought we could find an easier, softer way, but we could not. With all the earnestness at our command, we beg of you to be fearless and thorough from the very start. Some of us have tried to hold on to our old ideas, and the result was nil until we let go absolutely. Remember that we deal with alcohol, cunning, baffling, and powerful. Without help, it is too much for us. But there is one who has all power. That one is God. May you find him now. Half measures availed us nothing. We stood at the turning point. We asked his protection and care with complete abandon. Here are the steps we took, which are suggested as a program of recovery. 1, we admitted we were powerless over alcohol, that our lives had become unmanageable. 2, came to believe that a power greater than ourselves could restore us to sanity. 3, made a decision to turn our will and our lives over to the care of God as we understood him. 4, made a searching and fearless moral inventory of ourselves. 5, admitted to God, to ourselves, and to another human being the exact nature of our wrongs. 6, were entirely ready to have God remove all these defects of character. 7, humbly asked him to remove our shortcomings. 8, made a list of all persons we had harmed and became willing to make amends to them all. 9, made direct amends to such people wherever possible, except when to do so would injure them or others. 10, continued to take personal inventory, and when we were wrong, promptly admitted it. 11, sought through prayer and meditation to improve our conscious contact with God as we understood him, praying only for knowledge of his will for us and the power to carry that out. 12, having had a spiritual awakening as a result of these steps, we try to carry this message to alcoholics and to practice these principles in all our affairs. Many of us exclaimed, "What an order! I can't go through with it." Do not be discouraged. No one among us has been able to maintain anything like perfect adherence to these principles. We are not saints. The point is that we are willing to grow along spiritual lines. The principles we have set down are guides to progress. We claim spiritual progress rather than spiritual perfection. Our description of the alcoholic, the chapter to the agnostic, and our personal adventures before and after make clear 3 pertinent ideas. A, that we were alcoholic and could not manage our own lives. B, that probably no human power could have relieved our alcoholism. And C, that God could and would if he were sought.
Hi, my name is Lawrence Gehring, and I am an alcoholic. My sobriety date is March the 6th of 2019. The AA tradition. To those now in its fold, Alcoholics Anonymous has made the difference between misery and sobriety, and often the difference between life and death. AA can, of course, mean just as much to uncounted alcoholics not yet reached. Therefore, no society of men and women ever had a more urgent need for continuous effectiveness and permanent unity. We alcoholics see that we must work together and hang together, else most of us will finally die alone. The 12 traditions of Alcoholics Anonymous are, we AAs believe, the best answers that our experience has yet given to those ever-urgent questions: how can AA best function, and how can AA best stay whole and so survive? The 12 traditions of Alcoholics Anonymous. 1, our common welfare should come first. Personal recovery depends upon AA unity. 2, for our group purpose, there is but one ultimate authority, a loving God as he may express himself in our group conscience. Our leaders are but trusted servants, they do not govern. 3, the only requirement for AA membership is a desire to stop drinking. 4, each group should be autonomous except in matters affecting other groups or AA as a whole. 5, each group has but one primary purpose, to carry its message to the alcoholic who still suffers. 6, an AA group ought never endorse, finance, or lend the AA name to any related facility or outside enterprise, lest problems of money, property, and prestige divert us from our primary purpose. 7, every AA group ought to be fully self-supporting, declining outside contributions. 8, Alcoholics Anonymous should remain forever non-professional, but our service centers may employ special workers. 9, AA as such ought never be organized, but we may create service boards or committees directly responsible to those they serve. 10, Alcoholics Anonymous has no opinion on outside issues, hence the AA name ought never be drawn into public controversy. 11, our public relations policy is based on attraction rather than promotion. We need always maintain personal anonymity at the level of press, radio, and films. 12, anonymity is the spiritual foundation of all our traditions, ever reminding us to place principles before personalities.
Thank you, Jane and Lawrence, for helping me. Once again, welcome everybody. We're glad to have you here at the Came to Believe group located in Rocky Mount. I'll give you a little rundown of our meeting schedule. We are one group that meets twice a week. We meet each Tuesday and Friday, usually in the choir room on the other side of the breezeway. We're a big book study group, so the first 3 Tuesdays we're studying out of the textbook Alcoholics Anonymous. Takes us about 2 years to go from cover to cover. On the 4th Tuesday we study the tradition that corresponds with the month. And when there's a fifth Tuesday, we study AA history. Fridays are also closed meetings from 7 to 8. Those are closed discussion meetings. The chairperson for that month picks a topic out of AA approved literature and calls on the membership to share their experience, strength, and hope. And then, like tonight, the last Friday is the only night we meet in this room. It's our open speaker meeting. We get together about 6:15, 6:30. Closed meetings are for alcoholics or anyone having a desire to stop drinking. Open meetings are for anyone desiring to attend. This is an open meeting and we are so glad you are all here. Our speaker tonight is a gentleman I met probably back in 2009. He is a frequent visitor of this home group. He not only comes when we ask him to come and share his experience, strength, and hope, but he comes throughout the year and hangs with us. He's active in AA, he has a sponsor, he sponsors men, and he's just enmeshed all through AA. He's a really good guy. He's funny if you ever get a chance just to hang out with him. He's a really funny guy. And so not to take up any more time, Jerry W.
Guess I should start telling some jokes now. Yeah. I'm Jerry Weaver. I'm an alcoholic. Hey, Jerry. Do I need to move this, Mary? Can everybody hear me? There we go. All right. Don't want anybody to miss any of this. Sorry, Mary.
You got
I
that
just
there.
can't get in the right camera.
We
I
can
got
tell
it.
he ain't got mic
Look at
on
there. Test. I don't know if it's on.
There you go.
Anyway.
I'll switch right on it.
Get Lord turned up a little bit.
Now, okay.
Hey.
Let's start over. I'm Jerry Weaver. I'm an alcoholic. Good to be here tonight. My sobriety date is July the 2nd, 1989.
You did that.
Yeah, that's right. And I've got a home group called There's a Solution. We meet in Holly Springs on Tuesdays and Thursdays at 7 o'clock. Got a bunch of home group members here tonight. Appreciate y'all coming out. We had a good time on the way down. Probably going to have a good time on the way back. And it's good to be sober tonight. I also have a sponsor. Paige is my sponsor. I'll share a story with you. So I think Paige has been sponsoring me for over 30 years. And I was sober a couple of years, and I got sober in Coates, Dunn, Harnett County. And I actually started showing up for work on time and working hard. I was stealing money from them, but they didn't know that at the time. And started getting promotions. And so the company I worked for was opening up an office in Rocky Mountain. And they asked me if I wanted to help manage it. And I agreed to do it. And when I moved here, it was suggested that it was just before we could communicate with everybody as easily as we do now. Right? It was just regular telephones and fax machines, and you couldn't just get people on instantly like that. So it was unusual, at least around here, for somebody to have like a remote sponsor. You typically had a sponsor that was local. So it was suggested when I moved here to immediately get to meetings and try to find a sponsor. So I moved to Rocky Mount, moved over and was Brantley Apartments over on Sunset. And me and my first wife, we had just we'd been together for a little while, but anyway, we moved over there. So I started going to meetings in Rocky Mount. And just full disclosure, I was struggling with finding a sponsor. I was struggling with some of the things I was hearing in meetings. It was just different than the few groups that I went to in Dunn and Benson, Smithfield. And this went on for, it was actually a couple of months. And the whole time I'm talking to my other sponsor back in Coates. And one night I went to a meeting, it was in, I can't remember exactly where it was at, but it was in downtown Rocky Mountain. I don't know if they even have a downtown anymore. It's everything that's open, but there was a meeting in the basement of a church. And I was sitting in there, and it was some kind of discussion meeting, and there were people that were way off topic and talking about goofy stuff, and all of a sudden this guy speaks up, and he starts talking. And the basement of that church had these columns, and you couldn't see everybody. People would be blocked out. Well, this guy starts talking, and he starts talking about steps and God and being of service, and it was more like what I was used to. But I couldn't see him. And the column was blocking him out. I was like, well, I got to talk to this guy after the meeting, and hopefully I'll be able to get to him. And anyway, the meeting was over, and it was Paige. So I went over and talked to Paige, and I said, I told him what I was doing. I just moved here and was trying to get connected. And he said, well, we talked for a minute, and he says, well, listen, I'm going to my home group tomorrow night. I'll come pick you up. I said, okay. And he was all kind of like decked out, and man, he looked like he was all, he wasn't bulked up, he was just healthy looking. Sharp dressed, and so I told him where I lived, and I'm waiting for him to come get me. So I'm picturing he's going to pull up in some sports car or something nice. He pulls up in this big old long station wagon. What in the world? And so anyway, I get in, and his home group was in Wilson. It was the principal's group of Wilson. And so we're driving to Wilson, and we're talking, and he's like, well, let's stop here and get something to eat. I'm like, okay, well, we're going to go get a steak or something like that. He pulls into this, they don't even have them anymore. It was called Scats. And it was an offshoot of a Hardee's. It was like a miniature Hardee's. And we pull into this Scats, and he starts ordering hot dogs. And I'm like, guy's eating hot dogs, driving a station wagon. And then we're like in there, and he like walks behind the counter of this Scats and like starts telling people what to do. And it's like, I'm like, what is he? I didn't know he worked for the company. And it was funny. But anyway, we went to the group and we got to the group, and it was more like what I was used to, and so I joined the group, and Paige has been sponsoring me ever since. I just share that story because if you've ever moved in sobriety, it's not easy, and it's important. It would have been real easy for me to go to a couple of meetings and say, oh man, this ain't worth it, this is dumb, or this ain't worth it, and to just bailed out of AA. But I kept coming back, and God provided what I needed, and what the message and the solution that I was seeking. And I didn't have to make that happen. I just kept showing up, and the solution was provided. And that's been my experience for, ever since I've been in AA, is that if I show up and pay attention and look for opportunities instead of just trying to force stuff and make things happen, then typically I get what I need, and the results typically work out very well. So just a little story about how I got Paige to be my sponsor. Y'all ever heard that one? Huh? Okay. All right, Larry. I got you, brother. So listen, I did drink. I was in the basement. I was living up in Northern Virginia. Not many people think I'm from Coates. I'm actually not from Coates. Just for the record, this is something new too for the home group members. I was actually born in the District of Columbia. Not many people can say that. And I grew up in Springfield, Virginia. And all of my mom's family's from Northern Virginia and Maryland. Bethesda, actually. So anyway, I was sitting in this neighborhood in Springfield, Virginia one day, And me and a friend of mine, his dad had this big house with this bar on the bottom of it, and we decided we were going to drink. I'm 12 years old. I've seen what alcohol does to people. I come from a long line of alcoholics and just chaotic type drinkers and people, and was really afraid of what alcohol did to people. But we decided we were going to drink. I don't think there was any peer pressure or anything like that. We were just kind of curious and bored, and we started drinking Old Granddad 100 Proof, and bingo card there on that one. And then it lit me up, is all I can tell you. I was like a lot of people that you hear tell their story. And I didn't really understand what all of it was until I got sober, but I was just full of fear. I was scared, felt out of place, felt isolated, felt alone. Didn't know those words as a kid, but I just knew that there was something just wrong with me. And my mind would always just tell me all kinds of stuff that I know now wasn't true. And when I drank that whiskey, all that changed, all that went away. It made me feel like I was the king. It gave me power. All those feelings of insecurity and not being good enough and not knowing much all changed. And I immediately was smart, immediately knew, stuff, and was immediately just best friends with everybody, even though there wasn't nobody around but one other guy and my younger brother. Immediately knew how to do Fujitsu and Kung Fu and Taekwondo, and that's just what it did for me. And basically what happened was I took to it just like a fish to water. I immediately just knew that I was going to keep drinking. There was no plan to do anything different once I kind of discovered it. And not long after that, I discovered girls and heavy metal music and strobe lights and just all kinds of stuff. And I was labeled a juvenile delinquent at the age of 13. Got kicked out of the Stafford County school system, was told not to come back, and thought that was kind of cool. And I thrive on that like negative attention and getting into trouble and being chaotic and rebellious. And it was just, looking back on it, it was a bunch of nonsense, and it was really difficult on my parents and two of my brothers at the time, because we had to move around a lot because of me. Now I know now we moved around a lot also because my dad was fooling around with my mom, and he was like hiding from people. But anyway, that's different. That's a whole nother story. Anyway, I got kicked out of another school system. I got kicked out of the Fairfax County school system. Was told never to come back. They don't like kids that are selling drugs and drunk on campus. And that's how I ended up in North Carolina. Got in trouble in North Carolina. Got charged with assault with a deadly weapon with intent to kill. Sober, actually. And beat up a police officer in the town of Coates. Not many people can say they actually won the fight against a police officer, but I won. I had a little help, but we got him pretty good. And he just happened to be the son of the principal of the high school that I was trying to go to. It didn't work out too well for me in the long run. But anyway, I ended up going into the military, thinking that was going to fix me and change me. And, at this point, like a lot of us, I'm constantly in and out of trouble. I'm constantly, just doing chaotic things and thinking I'm cool. And no one's ever said anything to me about drinking. Matter of fact, don't believe I was alcoholic at that time. I just don't believe I was. I was a guy that just drinking just worked for me. And what happened was I went into the Air Force with these ideas of getting my life in order and amounting to something and proving to my family and other people that I wasn't a low-life loser. And that didn't happen. I just continued to drink. I started blacking out a lot. And I'd wake up in funny places and not know how I got there. I'd wake up with people that I didn't know. I'd wake up and the next morning show up at the chow hall, and people would tell me things that I did the night before, and I'd get in fights with people that I like went to the bar with, and I wouldn't remember. And you know, people that don't have blackouts don't believe you when you tell them that you don't remember punching them in the face. And I just kind of felt that happened to everybody, that everybody that blacked out and didn't remember things. I know now that's not really what happens. And I wouldn't think much about it. It just seemed normal to me. I got married. I ended up so I was stationed in Rantoul, Illinois. Yeah, you don't want to go there. We were flying in there, and we were landing, and all I saw was cornfields, and it was cold too. And I was like, man, what in the world? But anyway, my first orders. This is some new information. My first orders were actually to go to San Francisco, California, and I was scared to death to go to California. I don't know why. Mostly because my girlfriend, who became my wife, was back home in Coates, and man, I was pining for her. I don't know if that's a word people use anymore, but I was pining for her bad and was obsessed with her, and I was trying my best to get back close to home. And there was a girl who was in the same tactical school I was in up in Champaign, or in Rantoul, Illinois. It was Chanute Air Force Base was the name of the Air Force Base. And her orders were to go to Pope Air Force Base, which was near Fayetteville. And me and her switched orders, and she went to California, and I came to Pope Air Force Base. No one ever said anything, and I wish now I'd have gone to California, because the next 4 years were rough. I got married right when we got back, and I mean, looking back on that, I don't know. I mean, I know when two kids have their minds set on doing something, there's nothing you can do to shut it down, but I wish somebody would have shut it down. I was drunk the day I got married. We spent our honeymoon at a place called the Shaggers, which was a beach club, dance club in Dunn. And what happened was I continued to drink, and I really thought that getting married would like force me to be responsible, and it didn't. I mean, matter of fact, how irresponsible I was really started to come out, and the light kind of got shown on that, and which led to, family getting involved, and family asking me questions about my drinking, and how I was treating her, and things like that. And now I always knew that there was something wrong with me. And I've never had any delusion that my life was manageable. Never. I've never had any illusions that my mental state was good. I mean, I always knew there was just something wrong with me. But I didn't know what it was. And, drinking was the only thing that even kind of balanced that out or helped that. And why would you want to stop doing that if that's the only thing that's giving you any kind of relief or a purpose in life? But what happened to me was I knew that I needed to get my life in order. And I started to try to I made these attempts at getting my life in order, or today's the day I'm going to get it together. And then I'd start drinking at 9 in the morning or 11, and I'd say, well, we'll do it tomorrow. And I just never could get a hold on it. And what happened was I started to try to get my life in order. I started going to church, and I really tried. I rolled into a church on New Year's Day in 1989. It was January the 1st. I rolled in there with my brother, who's a preacher, And man, I would get so resentful at him. He's a guy that he went to this is worthless information, but he heard Billy Graham give a talk at Campbell University. And this was back in the mid 80s. And he immediately had a conversion, an experience, and could immediately preach. He immediately knew verses out of the Bible, and he was a teenager, and they would let him preach at the church. Man, I'd get so resentful about he'd be up there and the whole congregation, he'd have them mesmerized, and I can remember getting mad and thinking well, why are they liking him? What about me? And now I've done nothing. I'm out in the parking lot drinking Thunderbird wine, but I remember getting all resentful about that. But anyway, he took me to church that morning, and I was feeling bad. I wanted my life to change. I would. This is not too far off from the truth. That morning, I wanted to get better more than the day I actually got sober. I mean, I was desperate, but I didn't know what was wrong with me. And I went to church with him that morning, and I've been up for 10 days. And people prayed with me. They took care of me. They talked to me. I cried in front of about 200 people. And I left there, and a few days later, I was drunk. Was not their fault. Matter of fact, I looking back on that, if it hadn't been for some of those people in that church, I probably would have died. You would have a different speaker tonight. They took very good care of me for several months, actually. But I just dirtied everything about it. I would show up there drunk. I'd go in the bathroom out in the parking lot and drink and do cocaine right in the middle of the church service, and then come back in and be disruptive, and was just completely clueless about what I was doing and how I was living. But then I would leave, and I would feel conflicted and feel all guilty about it. And that would just lead to more drinking. And I started listening to gospel music, and they gave me a little New Testament pocket version. I'd carry that around with me, and I'd preach to people at work, and I'd pull that thing out on break and start reading it. And I just thought that if people saw me doing those things, that they would think that I was doing the right thing. And I couldn't stay sober. I would make promises to people and to myself and to my wife, and 30 minutes later be drinking. I would do things like, there were two guys that I drank with a lot at work. We would leave. We would do inspections on C-130 airplanes, and they were pretty important inspections on electronic systems. But sometimes we'd have 3 days to do an inspection, and if it was a good plane, if it didn't have a whole lot of mechanical problems, we could get an inspection done in a day, and we'd have 2 days to kind of goof off. So we'd show up for roll call, and we would walk down to the hangar where the plane was, and then we would kind of skate. We'd call it skating. We'd skate out, drink, get drunk, and then come back and show back up, and then leave. But we would get drunk all the time. We would sometimes go hide out in the woods and drink, or we'd go to one of these guys' houses. Well, this one dude, I've got that New Testament. I'm listening to gospel music, and I'm trying to save this guy, right? So I'm telling him, man, I quit drinking. I'm on the straight and narrow. He says, well, hey, you want to go to the house and get some lunch? It really wasn't unusual. We would do that sometimes, but we'd always drink. I was like, well, yeah, I'll go with you, but I'm not drinking. He said, yeah, that's no problem. We'll just go get a sandwich and come back. He's driving. I'm riding in the passenger seat, and I'm preaching to him all the way to his house. I'm telling him all this stuff I'm going to do and all this stuff he needs to be doing, and I'm pulling my New Testament out and reading scripture to him, and I'm laying it on thick, and I'm like, now I'm done. Quit drinking. And he's just shaking his head. His name was Jerry too. He's just shaking his head. Yeah, okay. And we get to his house. We walk into the kitchen. He says, hey, Jerry, you want a beer? I was like, yeah, I'll just take one. That's a true story. And it's and that's what the book talks about. There was just I'm serious here for a minute, but there's just no mental defense. I got no defense against that first drink. And then I'd be off to the races. And stuff like that just happened on and on and on. I got suicidal and attempted suicide 3 times. One time I woke up I came to in a tobacco barn with a girl that wasn't my wife. And man, I was so, and it was my best friend's cousin. And it's a different story. And I got out of the barn. I don't know if anybody's ever partied in an old stick tobacco barn, but it didn't have any gas going in it. It was cold. And I get home that morning, the next day or maybe 2 days later, and my wife is in there, wondering where I've been. I lied to her, make up all kinds of excuses. And she'd normally be riding the roads trying to find me. I don't know if she did or not that time, but I remember seeing her there and just having so much guilt and just shame about what I'd been doing. And there was a bottle of pills back there in the bathroom, and I took that whole bottle of pills, took them things down, and kind of laid down there in that little bathroom. And she came in there and she asked me what I did, and I told her. Well, she calls my dad and my stepmom, and they rush over there. And Debbie, which was my stepmom at the time, she comes in there and she asked me what I did. I told her, and so next thing I know, she's like sticking her fingers down my throat and trying to get me to throw up. And anyway, about half of the pills come up, and man, I was sick as a dog for like 2 or 3 days. They wouldn't take me to the doctor or to the hospital because they were trying to hide it from me. I'm still in the Air Force, and they're trying to hide this. And next time I made these promises to my wife. This was not long after that first time. And I had this dog that had mange, and the vet had given me this poison to kill the mange on this dog, bingo card. And then I thought it'd be a good idea to try some of it, so I shot some mange poison up, literally trying to die. I mean, I wanted to die. And what I can tell you is I ended up, I went out and actually had an experience, if you will. I won't go into all that tonight, but it was an outer body experience, and left. And when they were reviving me, I was fighting, I didn't want to come back. And I could see them doing stuff to me, and I couldn't stop not coming back. It just happened. And when I actually came to, the first words out of my mouth, I'll never forget this. I said, leave me alone. I don't want to live. And I'm not trying to be dramatic. It was just the truth. And I ended up going in the hospital for several days under one of my brother's names. It was terrible. And I got out of the hospital and knew I would never drink again. I would never go back to living that way. 3 days later, I'm drunk. And I don't know why. I don't know what's wrong with me. Can't seem to get things together. Not long after that, I get discharged out of the Air Force. My wife's gone forever. It seemed like it anyway. And I would get real dramatic with that. I came to, well, I shouldn't say I came to, I just kind of woke up one morning in this house that's infested with fleas. Electricity may or may not be on. I'm getting ready to lose it. I come to, and there's this young girl and this older guy in the house. The guy's name was Squirrel Man, if that gives you an indication as to... And it just wasn't a good situation what happened. And I left. I walked out of the house and left them in the house and just started walking down the road, and had just kind of given up on life. And I don't have a vehicle at this time. The old 72 Volkswagen I've got, the motor's blowed up on it. It's sitting in the backyard. I borrowed a car from a friend named Shaggy. Now, we called him Shaggy because he looks like Shaggy on the old Scooby-Doo cartoon. And I drove that car back to the house. Squirrel Man and the girl were gone. And I pulled that car into the garage. I shut the doors, left it running, laid down by the exhaust pipe, started huffing the fumes out of the pipe, and basically passed out. Went away from here for a little while. Woke up sometime later. I was laying in the backyard. Car still in the garage running. And I'm just sick as a dog. I get the car turned off. I get into the house, and I can remember this vividly. I sat down on the couch in the living room in there, and these were the thoughts I had. This is exactly what was going through my mind. I probably even said this out loud. I said, "Look at what you people have done to me." There's nobody there. I mean, I just dramatized. I thought the whole world, this is how self-conscious I was. I just thought the whole world just knew about me and was focused on me and thinking about me, and everybody's doing stuff to me. Nobody even knew who I was. I mean, and the family did nothing but love me. I mean, and they did not love me to death or all that enabling crap that you hear. They just cared about me. But that's what I was thinking, man. Look at what you people have done to me. It was all somebody else's fault, and that's the delusion that alcoholism gets you. I had been drinking alcoholically at that point for 3 or 4 years, and what happened to me was a few weeks after that, I tried to stay sober. I tried to get my life in order. I was making attempts, but I couldn't stay sober. And I went over to my cousin's house one night. He was having a little bit of a party. I suspected he was sleeping with my wife. She was there. She was in the back room. I never did see her, so that's the evidence that I have, although they deny it. And I started drinking because of that. And what happened was I came to a day or two later at another guy's house and left his house walking. Was going to hitchhike into town to write a bad check at the grocery store. And while I was walking down the road that morning, something happened to me. In that my plan to go write the bad check and to go to the bootlegger's house, it never happened. I started having these thoughts that I needed to get my life in order, that I wanted to drink, I didn't want to drink. The book talks about being at like a jumping off place. And looking back on it, I think that's where I was at. And I said out loud, like I was just I guess I was talking to God. I said, there's got to be something better than this. And then I said, God, please help me. And I've been sober ever since. I don't know how else I don't know how to really describe it. I don't want to imply that my life just immediately changed, or that I had some kind of experience that right then, because I didn't. But I believe that the sincerity and the honesty in that prayer opened up something to where God's light and mercy, if you will, or grace entered me. I didn't make that happen. I somehow surrendered and gave up. I don't think you can make a surrender happen. It happens. And what would happen to me is that I would eventually, that same day, I would be introduced to a member of Alcoholics Anonymous. And when he came and 12-stepped me in the detox I ended up in with, I was still drunk. He didn't wait. He hit me with the goods. I identified with what he said, and I wasn't real happy to be where I was at. I was very relieved to finally maybe know what was wrong with me, that I had alcoholism, and that is it's deep seated in fear and self-centeredness, and that it means that when I start drinking, I can't stop, and that I have a mind that tells me it's okay to do it, and I'll just keep doing it with no thought of consequences. The book talks about we don't have any defense against the first drink. Again, I've never disputed. When I heard that, I knew it was me. I never had to think about that or say, well, yeah, kind of, or no, I got that. Whatever, I mean, I got it. It doesn't matter how I got it or why I got it or how long I had it or whatever, but I know that I'm alcoholic today and that I can't drink successfully. And just knowing that you can't drink successfully won't stop you from drinking. That I'm powerless, so I've got to have power. And, you know, I was introduced to Alcoholics Anonymous. I was introduced to our literature. I was introduced to the steps. I was taught that the steps are the solution. I was quickly told that the amount of energy that I put into drinking, if I would put that, just half of that into staying sober, that I would probably make it. And, you know, I don't want to imply, I'm not a guy who came to meet and said, man, I finally made it home and here's my family. I've personally never had that experience, but it was better than what I had. And I knew that just by listening to people's stories, I just knew that this could work for me. And what happened was I took the steps quickly. I immediately, you know, identified with being an alcoholic and my life being unmanageable. I immediately became willing to believe in a power greater than myself. I just believed that whatever power got me through all those suicide attempts and kept me out of prison, whatever it was, it might help me stay sober. And was told to keep that simple, not put a name or label on it if I didn't want to, but just believe that there's power. And I felt power through people in Alcoholics Anonymous. I felt power through the meetings and through groups and listening to speakers. And that's the power that I turned my life over to in the third step. And early on, what that really meant to me was just trying to go to meetings and help sit up and help clean up, try to participate, hang out with people, even though I'm scared to death. And I'm a guy that's been active in Alcoholics Anonymous ever since I got here. And I know you don't hear that much anymore, but I've never stopped being a member of Alcoholics Anonymous. I've done some crazy stuff sober and have gotten off track with character defects, but I've never stopped being a member of Alcoholics Anonymous. I've never not gone to meetings. I've never not been sponsored. I've never not had a home group. And I think the benefits of that show up in my life. And so I did that fourth step and did the fifth step and started making amends at about 8 weeks sober. And what happened to me was my life started to change. In that the obsession to drink left. I couldn't tell you exactly when it left, but that monkey being on you, it subsided after about 3 months of being sober. And I started to realize that the world was not out to get me. I started to realize that all the perception I had about my family and about what I thought people had done to me and what I thought they were going to do to me, that most of it was nonsense. It was just delusions in my head. And I realized that this is true freedom when you get to the point where you realize that every decision I made is ended up causing all the things that I was worried about, all the things I was resentful about. I made a decision that set that ball rolling and caused that. And that most people had done nothing but try to help me. And I had that realization early in sobriety. And, my life started to change. And most importantly was that by taking those steps and making amends, I started to realize that when I took the right action, I got different results. And I also realized that by making some of those amends that were extremely scary and that they were life-changing. that God showed up and gave me the power with the words and the actions, and things that I thought were never going to work out started to work out. And not because I was doing anything about it. I just showed up and tried to do the right thing. And I was stark raving sober. Have been for a long time. And so I'll share a couple quick stories with you. When I was sober 9 months, and me and my wife got back together. Not long after that, we moved. We moved here to Rocky Mount. While we were in Rocky Mount, my wife went on a trip to the beach with my parents, with my dad and my stepmom. They come back from the trip, and she's like, "Hey, I just want to let you know I'm leaving." Now I'm, we've been together now for a couple of years after we got back together, and I'm thinking things were pretty good. She hooked up with some dude at the beach while she was with my parents. And anyway, she left. And it was one of the first times. I'm normally I'm a controlling dude, especially when it comes to her, right? And, my property type thing. And when she told me that, I remember one of the first things. Okay, well, what do I got to do to help you? And that's not what I wanted to say. And she left. And what I can tell you is it's the best thing. It was the best thing for both of us. But over a period of time, it didn't work out with her boyfriend. He ended up committing suicide or attempted suicide, and then she wants to come back. And of course, I'm taking some of our principles to the extreme. What says love and tolerance. You're supposed to forgive people. I remember I went to Paige and talked to Paige about it, and talked to Steve about it. We all met. What was the name of that? The Skillet or the Omelet, or what was the name of that place we used to go to anyway? And I ran it by them, this idea of getting back together with her. And I'm not talking bad about her at all. I know it probably sounds like that, but I'm not. She's a fine woman today. But I was in complete delusion. And they're telling me, man, you need to run. And given the circumstances, look back on it, it was absolutely the right thing for both of us. It seemed extreme to me, right? But I'm in delusion because of really not trusting in God. What I can tell you is I got through the guidance was to go file for separation. I was scared to death to do that. People were praying for me. I went and filed for separation. I got an attorney and went through a divorce. People in Alcoholics Anonymous helped me get through that with some dignity, being respectful, and divorce is never good for anybody, even in the best of situations, but this worked out just fine because of people in Alcoholics Anonymous that helped me. Not long after that, I started stealing money from work. Now, I'd been stealing money from work. And I started getting, because of the principles of AA, I started getting conflicted about it. I knew it was wrong. This is the truth here, what really got me really conflicted was when they fired somebody else for doing the same thing. I was like, whoa. There's the truth. Right? Yeah, I didn't just come on my own. But I went and talked to Paige, talked to Steve. They had some really drastic stuff. They're like, well, you're probably going to have to go back and turn yourself in and make an amends. I thought that was drastic. I really did. I just didn't want to do that. I didn't think it was right. Long story short, they asked me to pray about that. And what happened to me was I literally came to the realization that I didn't want to. I don't know exactly how to say that, but I didn't want to, in the eyes of God, I didn't want to have that over me. But I wanted to do the right thing, regardless of what the consequences were to me. And again, it's not dramatic. I'm telling you this because God is real. I'm telling you this because faith is not something that we just talk about. That by taking actions and actually expecting God to help me, I've gotten incredible results. And I went and I met with my employer and basically turned myself in and laid out what I'd done and what happened. And I was prepared to get fired. I was prepared to go to jail. None of that happened. Guy looked at me and said he'd been forgiven for worse. And of course, the first thing in my mind was, well, I wonder what he did. And they didn't fire me. I mean, I can't explain it. And I paid the money back. It wasn't mine to take. And ended up getting like a promotion a few weeks after that. But I'm not telling you to turn yourself in to get a promotion. It's just what happened. But people were praying for me when I was doing this, and it was well guided and planned. And so what happened to me was, I mean, by this time I'm sober about 5 years. And I realized that, like I said before, that the book talks about, or makes a statement that God is either everything or is nothing. I always thought it was funny that that's way up in front of the book. You think it'd be at the end, after you've had some experiences. But that's kind of what happened to me was, hey, are you really going to live this or just talk about it? Are you really going to step out in faith and believe that power is everything? And I started to realize that God is everything. I started to realize that Alcoholics Anonymous is a way of life. I mean, I'd always known that, but that I'm literally, and I can remember Paige told me one time, he said, you're literally supposed to take God with you everywhere you go. We'd kind of learned that from Don Pritz at a different level, but it never really occurred to me to actually consciously take God with me when I go to work. It never really occurred to me to consciously take God with me when I'm out in the community or when I'm with my family. And when I started practicing that, I started acting different. And typically when you act different, other people kind of respond differently. And my life, I don't know how to explain it, but my life started to change in that, I started to try to take that power with me everywhere I went. And, for the next however long it's been now, it's been a little while, I got remarried, was single for a couple years, got remarried, and have done that completely different than I did the first time. And I stayed on that job and that career for about 24 years and started trying to practice steps and traditions at work. Went from sweeping floors and stealing from them to being the president of one of their companies. Not because of anything I've done, it's because it's solely because of the principles that I learned in Alcoholics Anonymous, good guidance from men that have had experience and the power of God. It's not because of anything that I did. And I appreciate being asked to speak. I spoke here last year, same month, January, and last January there was a lot of kind of doom and gloom, and still is in the world, and uncertainty and stuff. And I think I had reported then that year, I guess that would have been 2020, was one of the best years of my life. It was a great year to demonstrate faith, and what I can report to you today is that 2021 was even better. And that in the midst of my mom getting seriously ill and almost dying. My dad passed away a couple of months ago. I had a serious injury on my wrist, probably worse than I told anybody it was. And man, it was a great year. Absolutely wonderful, because that's what the program has taught me, is to not let outside influences dictate what you do and how you feel, and that the power is unlimited. I can tell you that sometimes an AA will dramatize, like we'll take care of a parent and we think we should be given some special gift for it. Like, you know, like we've done something special. We've just done what we should have been doing all along. But I do understand this, that when my mom went to the hospital, the first phone call was to me. When my dad went to the hospital, the first phone call was to me. If I'd have been drinking, it's a fact I wouldn't have gotten the phone call. So in that aspect, Alcoholics Anonymous has done its job. And a guy who physically abused both of his parents, beat both of them up when he was drinking, is now taken care of. And the whole family has helped me or has given me the authority to make those decisions. There's nothing special about that, but that's the power of Alcoholics Anonymous. I was asked to leave a Thanksgiving dinner at my grandma's one time because I was drunk. And so AA has brought me from being kicked out of the house to making life decisions for family. And that's a long ways from sucking on the exhaust pipe of the 1982 Grand Prix. So I appreciate y'all listening.
Thank you so much, Jerry. Now y'all know how he has such a great head of hair. That mange medicine. Oh, I couldn't resist. This group practices the seventh tradition. There are no dues or fees. We do survive on our own voluntary contributions. That money is, to put it in a nutshell, used to help the next sick and suffering alcoholic to carry the message, either through literature, through our trusted servants going to conferences and assemblies, and what little bit of food we have. Thank you, Carol and Lawrence, for bringing that stuff. This group doesn't give out the little plastic chips. We are believers in sponsorship and working the steps. I don't think we have any home group anniversaries this month, but if anybody would like to join the Fellowship of Alcoholics Anonymous or this home group, all you have to do is say I do. All right, I forgot to ask somebody to read this paragraph off of page 100, so I guess I'll read it. And then we'll end with the Lord's Prayer. Also, one more little note. We used to have a lavish layout of food, and the church has kind of cut us back on that. So here lately, after speaker meeting, a lot of the home group members, and we invite our guests, we go to Hing Ta. They're friends of this home group. They open their doors for us and give us a room, and we can go in there and eat. So if anybody would like to go, open invitation for you to go. If you don't know where you're going, just get behind somebody and follow them, because we're like a funeral procession going down 301. Anyway, Paragraph off page 100. Both you and the new man must walk day by day in the path of spiritual progress. If you persist, remarkable things will happen. When we look back, we realize that the things which came to us when we put ourselves in God's hands were better than anything we could have planned. Follow the dictates of a higher power, and you will presently live in a new and wonderful world, no matter what your present circumstances. Our Father,
Who art in heaven,